made some interesting comments this week talking about the perennial nature of America's wars and how that may contribute to extremism. It echoes to some degree the comments made more than a decade ago by the Defense Secretary at the time, Donald Rumsfeld, who, in his words, are we creating more of them than we are killing, in effect? And I wonder if you could make your point here. Are you saying that by repeated military intervention in Iraq, in Afghanistan, drone strikes in countries such as Yemen, that there is a downside to that helps recruit extremists? I might mention that one of the Kawashi brothers in court papers said specifically that it was the U.S. invasion of Iraq and the abuse at Abu Ghraib that led him to want to go fight American forces there.
Well, here's the first and most important thing. There is never a justification, an excuse, a rationale for these kind of murderous terrorist attacks. The only people to blame for these murders in Paris and other assaults around the world are the individuals who perpetuated them. But my point has been simply this. We shouldn't be full of such hubris here in the United States that we don't have a conversation about the fact that there are things that we do, there are actions that we take that can create more terrorists, create more threats to the United States, and there are things that we can do, actions that we can take that will create less terrorists across the world. And I think that's a useful conversation to have. I have argued, and I think many others would agree with me, that the war in Iraq, which became a recruiting tool for Islamic extremists all around the world, made this country less safe, not more safe. I would argue that the way in which we have conducted drone strikes in some parts of the world have become bulletin board recruiting material for many of these terrorist organizations. That doesn't create a rationale, a justification for anything that has happened, but it just, I think, should create a conversation here in the United States about being careful about conducting a foreign policy in a way that ends up creating more of the very kind of people and organizations that we're trying to fight.
Now, would you say that the U.S.-led air campaign in Iraq and Syria is repeating that mistake then?
No, my caution has been that we should not be sending in a new deployment of massive ground troops into that fight. Robert Gates, the defense secretary under both Bush and Obama, said the next president that proposes such a thing should have their head examined. And there are many of my colleagues that are saying that we can't beat ISIS unless we put a massive number of new ground troops into that fight. I think ISIS is so dangerous, their momentum was so clear that we had to put significant air power and advisors on the ground. I support that, but I don't support essentially beginning a new U.S.-led ground invasion in Iraq or in Iraq and Syria, because that would, I think, tip the balance in terms of what's necessary to protect American national security versus what is going to, in Donald Rumsfeld's opinion, or the way in which he phrased it, create more of the people that we're trying to eliminate.